Okay. So, ang attendance ay 39. Andun na si Winmark, yung nasa dulo. Okay, and here we go.
If you're trying to build a desktop application in C++, finding a good GUI framework to use can be tricky. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are so many different options out there. You could use something like Qt or WX widgets. I mean, they seem to be popular, they're cross-platform. What's the problem? The problem is, I hate them. I mean, does anybody actually have a good experience using like Qt or WX widgets to build a C++ application? Not to mention the complex licensing model that goes behind some of these that might cost you quite a bit of money. So what do you do? What do you do if you just quickly want to make an app in C++? Why is everything so difficult? Well, before we answer that question, let's step back a little bit. Why are you using C++ to build an application? Because if you're not, there are so many things you could use. I mean, if it's just something simple, then maybe you could consider writing a web app that runs in like a web browser. That'd be easily cross-platform out of the box, including mobile devices and really anything with a good web browser. And if you wanted to be more desktop focused with that kind of ease of web development situation, then why don't you just use something like JavaScript and Electron? I hear it's great. For the more serious applications, you could use something like C# and WPF. I mean, yes, you'll be restricted to Windows only, but maybe that's okay. I could go on. The point is, there are many different ways to build applications. You don't have to use C++, and in fact, I would say C++ is kind of an unusual choice, unless you're like me. If you're building a performance-intensive application, or something that's low-level, or something that really highly revolves around a library maybe that's written in C++, and using wrappers or whatever is just a pain, and you want to just write an application in C++ instead, you know, for those use cases, it really does make a lot of sense to just write your actual kind of application GUI part of everything in C++. So, as an example, for those of you watching this channel, you know that I build game engines. A game engine, what is a game engine? A game engine is basically like this C++ core, or at least it is in most cases, that then has stuff built around it to facilitate the production of games, as an example. So since the core is in C++, and usually that core will adapt to whatever platform you want it to adapt to, so whether that be Windows, Mac, Linux, maybe mobile devices, maybe consoles, that core is very intrinsic to the application. Therefore, it makes a lot of sense to write any tools that might go along with the core that really rely on the core, such as an editor, which needs to actually have like a viewport that is the core running inside it, as well as adjacent tools. It makes a lot of sense to write that big tool, I'm talking about the editor, in C++. Now, you don't have to. I worked at EA for almost 5 years. They have Frostbite. FrostEd, the Frostbite editor, is written in C# WPF. It, of course, uses the Frostbite C++ core, but the actual tools are written in C#. So even if you are writing a game engine, of course you don't have to write your tools in C++. However, as I mentioned, the downside with C# WPF is that it's Windows only, which is okay for a company with proprietary technology such as EA, because their development teams can just use Windows. And in fact, in the games industry, most people do use Windows. I'm not talking about the indie developers with their cool MacBooks, I'm talking about like AAA developers usually run on Windows. Now, Unity and Unreal are two very big engines, very popular engines, that have the core written in C++, but then also the tools, or specifically the editor, is also written in C++. Unity has a bit of a C# thing going on with a lot of plugins and all of that, but the core kind of rendering framework is still there in C++. And if you want to be cross-platform, and if you are a game engine that already has a lot of rendering going on, in my opinion, it makes a lot of sense to write your editor in C++, and to also be using a GUI framework that uses like immediate mode rendering using your graphics API. The reason being that you are a game engine, like you are rendering things in real time, you're doing graphics intensive work. It's totally okay for you to use that same tech for your application UI. Anyway, game engines aside, what if I just want to build an application in C++? Why is this so difficult? What is the easiest way for me to get up and running? That is what I'm here for today. I just want to show you guys what I do when I want to build an application in C++, how it's incredibly simple and way easier than anything else I've tried, and out of the box it's not only cross-platform, including like mobile devices and consoles, but it can also adapt to any rendering API you might be using. DirectX 9, 10, 11, 12, OpenGL, Vulkan, Metal, and you only have to write your code once. And it's completely free and open source. Doesn't this sound too good to be true? I am of course talking about IamGUI, or Dear IamGUI, which is an absolutely wonderful immediate mode GUI library. But wait, isn't IamGUI some kind of like toy, you know, debug UI thing for like testing out applications, just something like really simple that can't be used to build big applications? No, it's not. It's amazing, and it can do pretty much anything. Now, I will put a little disclaimer here, just because, and that is, like, I don't want this to turn into like a retained mode versus immediate mode versus hybrid kind of UIs and like what the best thing to use is. I firmly believe immediate mode UIs are just superior, but I also acknowledge that it does depend on what you're doing. My specialty is in game engines. Game engines, as I mentioned, are very much real-time rendering dynamic machines. So for what I do, I think it's totally okay. If you are trying to be extremely efficient on some kind of low-spec embedded device or something, like, yes, maybe you don't need to render the UI every frame and be all responsive and stuff, but I would argue that right now in 2022, for most cases, immediate mode UIs are just better. But isn't IMGUI like really limited and you can't style it very well and it just doesn't look good? No! Where do you know? Because you're literally rendering everything as if it was a video game. Like, you can do literally anything. This is what Hazel's editor looks like. This UI is completely written in IMGUI. Yes, we did have to modify some parts of IMGUI to actually make this happen, but we are still using IMGUI and it is still great. To be honest, the only area where I start to see problems with IMGUI are like if you have absolutely huge data sets, if they're all being kind of rendered, refreshed every frame, you might run into some problems, but there are always strategies to mitigate that. You can just use caching in some form. However, in our experience in Hazel, like for example, if we have like hundreds of thousands of objects in the scene or something, the bottleneck has always been our code. So for example, like we need to show details in a tree view, and to get those details we have to hit like the asset manager and other engine systems to retrieve those details. Those have usually been the bottlenecks, not the IMGUI rendering code. My point is it's very fast. Anyway, enough talking. This has been quite the lecture, but I just wanted to explain to you guys what is going on. In a minute, we're going to dive in and take a look at how to actually write an application in IMGUI, but first I want to mention that this video is sponsored by Hostinger. Hostinger is pretty much the best web hosting platform on the internet. If you need to host a website or if you need a server for something to do on the internet, Hostinger is your go-to. Maybe you don't need to use C++ to write your application. Maybe you can write it as a web app. How are you going to host that web app? Using Hostinger. We use Hostinger to host hazelengine.com, which by the way you can go to find out more information about Hazel, the game engine that we're building. Setting up hazelengine.com was an incredibly simple process. Like, you just press a few buttons, fill in some details such as like, you know, the name of your website, pick your operating system, and it's pretty much ready to go. And that simplicity applies to if you just want like a shared hosting website deal, or if you're using a VPS like we are. And not only is the actual like UI and dashboard and all of that beautiful and simple, they also have a ton of useful documentation that will help you get going or do something really specific. It's not only useful if this is your first website. I mean, I've set up a lot of websites in my day, but just coming in and finding out the specifics of this web host in like just a few words on their documentation is so refreshing. But I guess having such a nice, clean user interface and brilliant documentation, you probably have to pay a lot for that, right? No, Hostinger's prices are honestly insane. They're honestly the best value web host I have ever seen. Click the link in the description below to sign up. If you use the coupon code CHERNO, you'll get an even bigger discount, and I promise you, you will not be disappointed. Huge thank you, as always, to Hostinger for sponsoring this video. So, as I mentioned, let's dive in, take a look at how we can make a C++ application using IMGUI. This is the IMGUI GitHub repository. This is where it all begins. Now, the only thing I want to point out here, apart from the fact that if this is your first time, you know, you should read the README, all that stuff, maybe get to know the library. There are two main branches. There's a branch called master, there's a branch called docking. The rest are just like feature branches, but these two, as you can see, are kind of like the main events. Now, docking, even though it's not the master branch, is a very mature, usable branch that has been around for like years. Eventually, it will be merged into master. It's not merged into master at the moment though, and it has a lot of really, really useful functionality, such as a dock space so that you can dock windows like you would in many applications these days, as well as being able to drag windows outside of the viewport, as you'll see when I show this later in this video. So my advice is to use the docking branch. Now, in my opinion, this docking branch is really what makes IMGUI actually useful in the real world for real applications. If it wasn't for that kind of being able to drag windows outside of the main window, and also, you know, dock spaces, all of that stuff, I probably wouldn't be making this video today recommending that you use IMGUI for applications, because without this it would be a little bit weird. So let's obtain this. I have prepared a folder Here it is, called IMGUI apps. If you just click on the little address bar, type in CMD to get to a command prompt, let's go ahead and clone IMGUI and we will start from there. So let's go ahead and grab that URL. We'll go over here, git clone. I always do a recursive clone just in case there are submodules that we need to obtain. I actually don't think IMGUI has any, but we'll do a recursive clone anyway. We'll paste in the repository URL. You don't really need the .git, it'll add it if it's not there. And then I'm going to check out specifically that docking branch straight away. So if you do a -B, we won't bother checking out master, and then we'll have to switch to docking. We can just check out docking. And then if you like, you can give it like a folder. So I'm going to call this my application. It's going to check out all of this code into a folder called my application, enter, and now it's going to clone IMGUI. Okay, done. That didn't take much time. Let's go ahead and go to that folder. Here we are. Here's my application, and we have all of our code here. Now, IMGUI works pretty much anywhere because it has a lot of really good examples, and you can see over here just how many examples it has. If you're just doing a speedrun and you just want to get up and running with IMGUI, then just open the IMGUI example solution, pick literally almost whatever you like. So for Windows, I recommend either Vulkan or like DirectX 11 or 12, but this isn't exactly a speedrun, so let's talk about this a little bit. These example directories have essentially like the boilerplate examples for each platform and library, right? So we have Win32, like DirectX 10, for example. This is using the Win32 API to actually like create the window and handle all the events, and then it uses DirectX 10 as the rendering API, as the graphics API. So GLFW OpenGL2, for example, will use GLFW as the windowing and event library and all that, and then it'll use OpenGL like version 2 compliant code to actually do all of the rendering. There's even mscript and stuff here, so you can run it on the web. There's Metal, so you can run it. This will probably just be a macOS version, but they do have like iOS and Android example somewhere else. Here's an Android example, for example. The point is, there's a ton of stuff here, and then not only is there this, but they now have a backends folder. This used to be part of examples that contains the actual backend files for all of these. My point being that it's really easy to integrate this with literally anything. And that's the beauty of this. That's what makes this so amazingly cross-platform. The fact that they just have example implementations of everything and you don't have to do anything yourself, right? All you really have to do is open up this IMGUI examples.solution. Now, I'm going to upgrade all of mine to like the latest because I'm using Visual Studio 2022 and I think this is still 2019. Let's go ahead and drag that into here. It's upgraded all the projects. Cool, that should be pretty straightforward. And then as I mentioned, we pick something. So as an example, I'm just going to pick GLFW Vulkan. Let's set that as the startup project. If we wanted to keep things clean, we could unload like literally all the other projects. And I mean, this is where like if you were actually writing an application, like you were writing your own application using IMGUI, maybe you wouldn't start with just, modifying this example solution. If you want to see a video on how to actually create a project from scratch using IMGUI, let me know. I'll probably do that. But otherwise, this is just going to be faster. So you'll see basically 5 main files in this kind of example GLFW Vulkan. Main is the entry point, as it implies. This is what has the actual like main function, if I can find it over here, right? There's our int main. It's got a bunch of GLFW boilerplate code, and see, this is where it's so amazing. This is why I love IMGUI so much as well, because not only is it an amazing GUI, like library, framework, whatever, it's also a fantastic kind of example of how to get up and running with all of these like APIs, like whether you're using GLFW for windowing or SDL or Win32, here's a beautiful example of how to set up GLFW, create a window, set up Vulkan for it, and then render UI to it, right? So if we just hit F5, this is going to be a debug build, but it doesn't really matter for us. This is what we get. Right, this is basically ready to go, right? We have a beautiful application, and as I mentioned, because this is the docking branch, we can literally take this and just drag it out of the window. And you can see it's now its own window. This isn't possible in the main branch or in the master branch. This is why, again, as I mentioned, like this kind of functionality is great. I can drag it to my other monitor. I can treat it like it was a normal application, which is amazing. And then under examples, we've also got that dock space, right? Now it's a dock space. Now I can dock this in here, and you can see suddenly we have a very like real looking application, but it's all running in IMGUI. It's all rendering like, well, in this case at VSync, I'm on a 144 Hz monitor. Like it's all rendering like real time frame to frame. Every frame is rendered from scratch. We have a good immediate mode UI ready to go. So how do we kind of convert this into our own application? Well, from here, you could literally set up anything you wanted to, right? And there's even some useful comments being like, if you want your own font, because that's a common request, IMGUI's default font is a bit, debug, looks like a debug UI thing. You can change that easily, obviously. And then we have, like, again, very well annotated, the main loop here. So inside the main loop, we have some important IMGUI commands that have to happen at the start of each frame. So IMGUI impl Vulkan new frame, GLFW new frame, and then finally IMGUI's new frame. Once you finish these 3 lines of code within that main loop, this stuff is basically rendering all of the UI that we just saw. So let's just say we're not interested in this, right? And then it goes all the way down to the actual rendering code. So that we also need to keep. So over here now is where my code goes here, right? So within this now, we could set up our own UI. So to demonstrate this in a little bit more of a kind of robust way, I'm going to create a new file. Now, I'm not sure where this will go exactly because I don't know where the directory is. It's okay, we'll just put it in here. I'm going to go ahead and create a new item, and this is going to basically be like our application, like UI stuff. So I'm going to create a new file just to keep it clean and simple so you guys know what I'm talking about. New file, new header file there, and a new CPP file. You know, if I wanted to, well, let's just keep this simple, right? I don't want to be all overkill here. Let's just create like a namespace called my app. And then we'll create a function called like, you know, render UI or something like that. Nice and simple. Let's go back to that C++ file. There's our render UI. And then over here, you know, as long as we include IMGUI, and I don't even know how this was including in that IMGUI, so let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so like this, basically all we need, right? Over here now, I can like create a window. So IMGUI begin, and you know, let's just say this is going to be my like settings panel or something. I create that window, IMGUI end to end the window, and then we can like add a button, hello. Let's add like a drag float, so we can have like a static float value. We can have like some kind of thing that we drag around. This is just an example, obviously. That's our settings panel done, render UI. So if we go back to main, let's just include that application window, or sorry, that application file that we just made, application.h, and then we just do my app render UI, F5, and we now have that settings panel I talked about, right? But what about the dock space? So we can see that there is no dock space. This is actually Vulkan rendering a clear color in the background here, which again is another perfect example. You know, if you are in fact writing an application that revolves around graphics rendering, this is where it's great to use IMGUI as well, because you basically have all the Vulkan boilerplate stuff done. You can start rendering whatever graphics you like, as well as have UI stuff easily on top of that. And that works really well, obviously. So how do we set up that dock space? In fact, how do we do anything in IMGUI? Well, IMGUI has a fantastic file called IMGUI demo.cpp, which is huge. It's like 8,000 lines, and it has examples for everything that you might want to do. So let's go ahead and simulate a scenario in which I don't know what to do. How do I create something? Well, the first thing is, let's go back to our app, right? I'm going to go ahead and just type in IMGUI show demo window. F5, right? So now we're not only going to get our settings window, we also get that demo window. Now within this demo window, you can just have a browse. So like basics, you know, here's like some stuff I might want. Oh, I want to make a tree. How do I make this whole tree thing, right? And because these all have strings, obviously, that are rendering, you can just search for these strings within the file. So for example, basic trees. Let's go to that IMGUI demo file and search for basic trees. Here it is, right? And we have, again, the actual code that was used to render this specific like tree. So again, as an example, we know that we have a dock space somewhere here, and it's gone ahead and made it on the main window here. So let's just search for dock space. This is an example for docking and dock space, right? So show example app dock space. So again, I'm going to just literally copy like all of this. Now there's a menu bar here, and there's some stuff that we probably don't care about, but let's just copy the whole thing anyway. We'll go back to application. I'll put it at the beginning here. So then we'll just strip it. So what don't I want? So like, again, popen is not really a required parameter here. We can replace it with an on point because we don't want to close the thing. Show docking disabled message, like we don't need that stuff. Sure, we'll keep the menu bar. What's this, a menu item? Again, we can probably just strip some of this stuff we don't care about, like help marker. Well, this is the close option. I'm not going to have a close option. Done, right? And then I'll take my settings panel and put it within the dock space. Like that, we can get rid of the show demo window, and then suddenly, just like that, we have a dock space, we have this, and guess what? It's now dockable. So we can just dock it over here. Again, to extend the example of a game engine, let's just say I have a viewport panel as well. Right? So I'm going to make another viewport window. I'm going to go ahead and dock this into here. There's my viewport, dock it into the center, and guess what? I basically already have like my game engine up and running. I just need to render my stuff in Vulkan or DirectX or whatever I'm using to a texture, to a frame buffer, and then just display that image inside this IMGUI viewport as just an IMGUI image. Right? That is literally done. And then of course if you close this and then reopen it, it's going to save all the layout, and that gets saved inside an imgui.ini file. So it's basically like ready to go. It's such a simple thing. And because we've kind of segregated everything into this application, into these two application files, let's say that I don't want to use Vulkan anymore. I want to use DirectX 12, right? Because that's, I don't know, for whatever reason, maybe I need to, or I want to, or whatever. I can go ahead and just like grab these two applications. Now, of course, this is not like the best architecture. Like you'd probably want like a static library or something with these things. But for now, I'm just going to copy application.h and .cpp into here, right? I'm going to set that as my startup project. We can like unload that Vulkan project entirely so it doesn't get in the way. And then again, I'm going to go into main. I'm going to include application.h, and then I'm going to go into like the main function. I'm going to find my, IMGUI like render is kind of what I'm looking for. There's my rendering code, there's that example UI code, and then we have the same pattern. DX12 new frame, Win32 new frame, IMGUI new frame. So in between these two, let's do my, the my app render UI, F5, now it's building the DirectX 12 example using the Win32 API. Of course my INI file like didn't get carried across, so I'll have to reset up the layout, but you can see that's it. Like that's up and running, but that's my DirectX 12 example. And of course, if we wanted to customize that text a little bit, we could just change the title to like my app or something. And then now we have my app up and running with everything. So really simple. This was practically a speed run. I apologize if I went very fast. And as I mentioned, this is not like, the best architecture, but this is just how you get up and running with IMGUI. Really easy. And from here, of course, you can build literally any application you want. It doesn't have to have any rendering, right? I don't want you to get the wrong idea. Like, you don't have to render 3D graphics in this viewport. You can, but you don't have to. This could be a calculator app, right? It doesn't matter. But the point is, it's just really easy to get up and running. Works on every platform, any like device, really. And yeah, I don't think I need to say anything else. But you know me, I will say something else. If you want to actually see where the app was like created to, and you want to distribute this for whatever reason, let's go back to like debug, or I'm just going to one of these things to see where the exe file was output to. Let me just make that a little bit wider so you can see. I like to use this output console sometimes to just quickly grab the path. So this is my exe file that we were debugging there. This is a debug build. You'll probably want to use a release build. But anyway, here is my like DirectX 12 example. Let's actually do something cool though. I like that layout. So let's go ahead and grab that IMGUI INI file. And we'll pop it into this debug thing and overwrite this one just so that we retain our layout. And that's it, right? We now have our application. There's a lot of like debug symbols and stuff that we really don't need. It all builds into a static library, right? So this little my app situation, my app, is now literally just this exe file and this INI file, right? If we grab that, put it into an isolated directory so it's clear what actually goes into this, rename this to like my app, we've made an application. We've made a C++ application that is like 2 megabytes. Again, this is a debug build, so I regret everything. It will be much smaller and much... Let's actually do that. Let's just build a... Let's make a release build. I just did a build all, which is not what I wanted to do. Let's just build this specifically. And again, it's just going to put it into the release directory. Here it is, 473 kilobytes. Let's go back to our my app and we'll just delete that, replace that. Enter, there's our release build, up and running. Done. Ship it. It's literally ready. Well, actually, we do get that console window though, so maybe I'll take back my ready to ship thing. Let's go back into the release configuration here, into link a system, and we will just set this to be Windows instead. Let's go ahead and rebuild that. Now we will get a linking error over here because of WinMain. Honestly, I feel like the Win32 example should definitely include that instead, but you basically have to, I don't remember the WinMain, like function. But for a Windows application, you have to use the WinMain entry point. So let's go ahead and quickly, we don't really need all this fancy stuff, do we? F5 to just double check. Okay, now we get no console being allocated there, which is good. So if we go back to my app and go ahead and go into release, copy that, you know the drill, paste it in, my app, enter, no console, ready to ship. I can't believe it's not butter. I mean, I can't believe that was that easy. If you want to see some more content around IMGUI, definitely let me know. As I mentioned, I can go a little bit deeper into how to actually set this up from scratch, not using their examples, but you know, how you would set it up if you had like an existing library or game engine or something like that. Or if you want to see some more like styling stuff, so how to get it actually looking nice and how to get it to look more like Hazel, all that stuff, let me know as well. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope it was helpful to you. Hope this will help you out with your C++ application.
Alright, so I'd like you to appreciate yung ginawa niya. Diba? Isang buong library na yun. Imagine niyo yung C natin dati, no? Nagsimula tayo sa very basic talaga, no? Kaya, kumbaga, magagamit mo na yung lahat ng features ng ano. Ang tingin ko doon ay isang template, no? So, doon sa IMGUI, marami siya doong library. Actually, isang library lang yun, IMGUI. Tapos, may mga nakalagay doon na pwedeng gamitin. Katulad nung Vulkan at saka nung DirectX. Depende ko nung gagamitin ninyo, no? So, these are rendering, no? So, isang buo na siya, no? Ma-appreciate nyo yan kasi nag-C kayo, we did the very basic. Ito, isang buo na to, no? Isang buo na, gagamitin mo na lang, no? I-edit mo, depende sa requirement. So, yan. So, well, nasa inyo yan. Kayo naman ang gagamit. I just would like you to see some other options you can use. Lalo na dun sa may balak gumawa ng games using C++, no? Na magandang pag-eksperimentohan yung mga ano, no. Tapos meron akong sinend sa ano, sa GC na andun yung itong YouTube video, yung link. At the same time yung again, dapat meron na kayong GitHub account. Libre naman yun, wala namang bayad yung magkaroon ka ng GitHub account. Kasi sa GitHub marami kayong mapipick up, lalo na yung mga programs na gawa na pwedeng yung gawing reference. Maraming C++ na pwedeng yung maging pattern dun sa GitHub. Anyway, itong IMGUI, naka-load siya sa GitHub, no? So, dun yung pipick upin para ma-install. Just in case you wanted to use. I also put a link on other option aside from other alternatives aside from IMGUI, ano? So, kung i-check nyo yan, yung mga other alternatives. So, parang katulad dito ng IMGUI. Hindi ko nga lang alam kung gaano siya kaganda. But then, you know, you have other sources to use, no? These are already objects that, libraries that you can make use of, no? Ayan, nakalagay. Kasi, yung ating first na dapat ma-achieve ay makagawa tayo ng ating project. Simple na application for the midterms. Kaya, ayan, nandito na ako, nagpapaalala na ako, no? Okay, so, I hope na-appreciate niyo yan. Right. Okay, so, let's go to, ano ba yung kailangan nating ma-accomplish ngayong araw na to for our subject of computer programming. Kailangan, naka-ready na yung ano ko eh. Naalala nyo ba kung saan tayo natapos?
Sa while and for po.
Sa? Paulit po.
Sa while and for po yata.
While and for, okay. So, while and for. Okay. So, pwede na tayong mag-move on sa, sige, while and for. Okay. While and for. Okay. Pwede kong ayan. Para makita ko yung ating So, dito, tapos na tayo ng while at saka for. Yung reading the unknown, hindi pa natin nagagawa. Reading the unknown number of inputs, di pa?
Nagawa na po.
Nagawa na, okay. So, dito na tayo sa if else. Correct?
Pati po pala yan na take na po natin yung if else.
If else. Alright. So, else if naman. Ayan. So, iba naman yung makikita nyo dun sa difference nung sa if else at saka else if. Ayan. So, babalik-balikan natin yung if else at saka yung else if. Okay. So, start na tayo sa else if.
In Visual Studio Code and see if it is working properly. So here we have that program written down in Visual Studio Code and I have saved.
Okay. Simulan natin.
In this lecture, we'll be studying about the else-if statement. So in the previous lecture, we have studied about the if and the else statements, and we have seen an example to see their working. Now in that example, we saw that we wanted to add one more feature to the program that we wrote. So we will study about the else-if statement in this lecture, and we will see how to add that feature which we wanted to add in the previous lecture. Okay, so let's get started. So coming to the else-if statement, the else-if statement is used to specify a new condition if the first condition is false. So this is the use of the else-if statement. So we have seen in the previous lecture when we used the if and the else, we saw that in if we used to give a condition, and if the condition is true, then the block inside the if statement gets executed. Now, if it is not true, then the block inside the else statement gets executed. But here we are going to have something called else if. So we will see the flow and then we will try to understand its working. So here is the flow of the else if statement. So here also, similarly like the previous case, we start with if statement. So here we are going to have an if condition. So we will check if the if condition is true or false. Now, if the if condition is true, then we execute the code inside the if block. Now, if the if condition is false, then we come to the else if condition. So in the previous case, we saw that if it was false, we just come to the else block directly and that's it. But here, if it is false, we come to the else if condition. So in else if also, there is going to be another condition and it will check if that condition is true or false. Now if that condition is true, then the code inside the else if block will get executed. And if it is false, then the code inside the else block will get executed. So here we see we are going to have else again. So basically it is like this. We are going to start with if, check the condition, and then if it is false, we come to else if. And if that is also false, then we come to the else block. So this is the flow of the else if statement. So we see that there are going to be two conditions over here, the if condition and the else if condition. Okay, so let us see the syntax and then we will see an example to see its working. So coming to the syntax, we start with the if condition. So if and then within parenthesis we write the condition. Now if this condition is true, then the block of code to be executed if condition 1 is true is written over here. So that means if this condition is true, this block will be executed. Now if it is not true, then it will come over here, that is to the else if. So in else if also there will be a condition which is condition 2. Now it will check if condition 2 is true. So here we have the block of code to be executed if the condition 1 is false and condition 2 is true. That means if this is false and if this is true, then this particular block of code will be executed. Now if this is also false, that means if condition 1 is false and 2 is also false, then we have an else statement and this will be executed when condition 1 is false and condition 2 is also false. So this is the syntax that we have for the else if statement in C++. Okay, so let us take an example to understand its working. So we are going to take the same example we took in the previous lecture, that was to take an input from the user and to...
Okay. So tandaan lang natin, no? So kung mare-recall nyo yung ating if else, yung una, no? This one is else if. So yung if else, okay, hanggang dito lang siya, no? Hanggang dito. Okay. So, pagdating dito, tapos na siya, no? So, dito nagkaroon ng else if. So, may kailangan siyang i-execute na condition, no? Both condition has to be false bago siya mapunta dito bago siya matapos, no? So, kung ang condition ay true, tapos yung isa ay false, okay, hindi pa siya matatapos. So, matatapos lang siya pag parehong false. and then ito na, magiging else na, no? So, pagdating dito sa else, meron siyang i-execute, okay? It has to be false. Ano? So, yun yung pinagkaiba nung sa ano, no? Dun sa if else, yung last time na diniscuss natin, dito sa else if. Ayan. Okay. Tuloy lang natin.
Check if that number is less than 10 or greater than 10. So coming to the example, here we have our header, and then here we have the main function, and inside main we declare an integer num which is initialized to 0, and then we ask the user to enter any number, and then we accept that number to the variable num. Now here we are going to make use of the if and else if. So in the previous lecture, if you remember, we were checking if the number was greater than 10, and if it was greater, we just printed it is greater, and we just had one else block where we printed the number is less than 10 if this condition is false. But here we want to have three things. We want to print the number is greater than 10 if it is greater, and we want to print it is less than 10 if it is less than 10, and we also want to print the number is equal to 10 if the user enters 10 itself. So we are going to accomplish that using the else if statement. So here we start with if, and we say that if the number is greater than 10, then we print the number is greater than 10. And here we have this else if statement. So inside else if we are writing if the number is less than 10. So if this condition is true, then we print the number is less than 10. Now, what are the other possible cases? There can be three cases. One is the number is greater than 10, then the number is less than 10, and apart from these two cases, there is only one case that remains, that is, the number is equal to 10. So, if both these conditions are false, that implies that the number is equal to 10. So, inside this else block, we write the number is equal to 10. So, in this way, we have the complete program. So we have the support if the user enters a number less than 10 or greater than 10, or even if it is equal to 10.
Okay, so let's try. This. Meron lang tayong gagawing different dito sa ating code, no? Okay, so buksan natin yung ating mga compiler and let's do a practice. Okay, so bago natin simulan, let me just give some again, no? May babaguhin lang ako. Okay, so last time, yung ating first na makakatapos agad ay kailangan nakataas ang kamay, no? Dun sa ating MS Team. And then, instead na isa lang, okay, we'll have 5, no? 5 na, first 5 will be 10 points, and then the rest will be 5 points. Okay, so yan yung ating pointing system. Now, ano yung gagawin yung iba, no? First, instead na STD, tapos colon C out, at saka colon sin, at saka colon ENDL, no? So, gamitin natin, again, instruction, gamitin natin namespace, ha? Namespace. Namespace STD para malinis. Para doon sa ating library na gagamitin, no? Yun doon sa ating input-output stream. Okay, next. Dito sa ating kasi meron siyang tatlong out, no? May tatlo siyang case na out, no? So may naka-C out dito. I mean dito sa magiging output ng ating condition, no? So yan yung natin, no? So ang gusto ko lang baguhin nyo dyan is dun sa unang C out, okay, it has to be greater. Tapos yung next na case, less than, and it has to be the last, yung panghuli ay equal, no? Now, dito sa ilalagay nating number, okay, ilagay natin sa number 12. Ayan, number 12. Instead na number 10, no? Okay. Ayan. So, yun lang yung mga changes, no? Instead na 10, number 12. Ayan. Dito sa gusto nyong maging see out na text, nasa inyo na yan, no? Kung gusto nyong palitan or gusto nyong gawa ng bagong wordings. But, it has to be greater, yung ating pagkakasunod-sunod, greater, less, and then equal. Okay? So, kayo na yung mag-decide dyan. Alright, so yun yung ating activity. Sige, gawin nyo na. At, i-stop ko lang ito. Tingnan ko lang kung may nakatapos na. Meron may nakatapos na ba agad? Alright, titingnan ko lang yung ating kung meron na nagtaas ng kamay. May nagtaas na ng kamay. Okay. So, sino yung first 5? Wow! Ang bilis. Okay. So, pag naka-20 na tayo, 5 pa, pwede na tayo mag-start. So, yung ating first 5, si Christina Provido, si Winmark, si Chester, si Paula, and si Prancel. Ayan. So, first 5, 10 points. Dinagdagan no? Okay. Teka lang Para may nagreklamo sa akin kasi, ma'am, baka gusto mong dagdagan, bakit iisa lang? Kasi last sem nga naman ay 5. Ayan. Okay. Alright. 17. Natin. Okay. 3 na lang. Pwede na tayo mag-start. Pakita ko lang ito. Ayan. Yun po yung ating gagawin. Again, yung instruction, kailangan ng namespace. Tapos yung ating cout, mag-start sa greater. And then less than, and then equal. Tapos yung ating dito, yung magiging condition na number is 12. Ayan. Okay, tingnan ko nga, baka nasa 20 na tayo. Alright, 17 pa rin. Sino natapos? Tapos na. Magsabi na po. Hindi po tayo Ayan. Siguro pwede na tayo mag-start. Ayan, 2 na lang.
Mani una, greater than ba? Tama po ba?
Greater than, less than, and then equal. Ayan. Isa na lang. Pwede na tayo mag-start. One more. One more, guys. Naleg ko. Mataas pa naman ang dugo ko. Ayan, tapos na. Oy. So, yung iba, magtaas na ng kamay, para matawag kayo. Sayang din yung ating participation points, Okay, let's start. Christina, pwede nang mag-start. Provido, pwede mo nang i-share. Ayan. Okay. Alright. Diba? Nilagyan niya ng At meron pa pala akong isang sasabihin bago simulan ni Christina, if you will do something different from my instruction, which is very creative, that's another 5 points. Ayan, okay. Basta hindi lang makaka-distract dun sa gusto kong output, Ayan. Sige, Christina. That is equal. So, nag-start ka ng equal. Okay. Okay, that's greater. And okay, less than. Alright, okay. Okay. Alright, thank you. Thank you, Christina. Alright. No talkies. Okay, si Winmark. Next. Yung ating second na 10-pointer. Okay. Meron ba siyang ginawang kakaiba? Wala eh. Okay, sige. Sige. Greater than. Okay. Next. Alright, less than. Okay. Okay. Equal. Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Winmark. Next, si Chester. Okay. Mukhang iba yung ginawa nito Aha. Okay. Meron kang ginawang iba dyan. Alright. At dahil dyan, meron kang additional na 5 points. Teka, tester, bago mo tanggalin, ibalik mo muna yun para makita natin kung bakit ka na iba. Dali, pakita mo muna, tester. Para ma-appreciate ng mga klase mo. Okay. So, mag-load ka lang ng isang test lang. Yung equal. Sige, urong mo pa ng konti para makita natin yung code. Ayan, sige. So, that value is exactly 12. So, tingnan nyo, nakita nyo, lumitaw doon is yung that value exactly 12. Now, Chester, paano mo ginawa yan? Sige, sabihin mo sa kanila. Meron ka bang audio dyan? Yes.
Ano pong tanong?
Iba kasi yung instruction nun sa'yo eh. Iba yung code na ginawa mo. So, paano ka nag-arrive dyan sa instead na lilitaw lang yung may ginawa kang bago dun sa code. I mean, meron ka ditong code na hindi nag-i-exist dun sa natin. Sige, ano yon? Sabihin mo sa kanila para...
Yung ano po ba, yung quotation mark, tsaka yung...
Ayan, correct. Ayan, correct ka dyan. Okay, so nilagyan niya ng etong N-T, okay, in quotation mark, no? So, wala siyang naandun pa rin siya within the specification na gusto nating palabasin, but it made something different. Ayan. Okay. So, dapat aware ka rin kung ano yung ginawa mong kakaiba dun sa code, para masabi mo naman sa akin. Hindi ako sinagsabi sa kanila. Dapat ikaw magsasabi nun. But anyway, that's plus 5 points. Thank you, Chester. Ayan. Makita niyo yung, yung mga ganun. Parang meron kayong maisip pang bago dyan. Ayan. Next, si Paula. Paula Lay. Okay. And please input desired number. Okay. Alright, that's less. Dang. 99, that's greater. Okay. And number 12. Okay. Thank you, Paula. Kung naalala niyo yung last time na ginawa natin, siya, no? Yung kung halimbawa yung value nakalagay doon sa sa condition ay 12. So, at 12 din yung nilagay mo, less than pa rin siya, no? So, ito exactly sinasabi niya that it is equal to 12. So, yun yung isang difference pa ng else if natin. Okay. Next. Francel, kasama ka dun sa 5? Francel, kasama ka ba dun sa 5? Or meron lang umalis dyan?
Opo, ma'am. Kasama po.
Kasama siya sa 5. O, sige, si Francel na yung pang 5th. Ayan. Sige, test na natin. Alright, that's greater. That's less. And that is equal. Alright. Okay. Thank you, Francel. So, the next, after Francel, Justin. Puro na to lahat 5 points pababa, no? Okay. Okay. Wait. May ginawa ka dyang kakaiba. Tingnan nga natin. Int. So, meron ka dyang ARG. Tapos, yung char na 2, ARG. Okay. Sige, i-load mo muna at tingnan natin kung paano mo ginawa yung iyong Okay. Okay. Sige. So, tingnan natin yung code mo. Slash number. Andun yung number. Eto bang, nasan ka? Justin, magsalita ka.
Hello po.
Okay. Yung nasa loob nung int, these are variables. Yung int, A, R, G, C, or
Ano,
merong purpose ito. Ano to?
gumawa ko ng project, automatic na po itong system generated na po.
System generated na siya. Sa DevC,
Apo, sa DevC po.
chart 3. So, this is not something you did. So, system generated siya. Alright, okay. Kala ko sa iyo eh. Gonti ko ng bigyan ng ano eh, no? So, system generated pala siya. Alright, so, next. Juan Miguel. Tingnan natin kung may ginawa si Juan Miguel na kakaiba. Meron nga siyang ginawang kakaiba. Ano kaya yun? Mamaya explain mo yan ha. Sige, test muna natin. Sakit sa mata. Pink. Pink na text. Okay. Tapos, parang galit na galit yung pink. Less than. Okay. Okay. Explain mo nga yung kakaibang ginawa mo. Sige nga, Juan Miguel. Ano yung kakaibang ginawa mo?
Binago ko lang yung color.
Patingin ng code. Tingnan natin kung paano mo binago. So, paano mo ginawa yung, yung fuchsia na masakit sa mata? Saan yun? Ipakita mo dun sa code. I-highlight mo.
Nakita ko lang po
Saan?
sa YouTube po.
Sa YouTube. Okay. So, natuwa ka lang ginawa mo. So, saan yun? Saan yun sa code mo?
Dito po. Windows.
So, nilagay mo sa taas. Yung windows.h. Okay. Now, alam nyo na kung saan nyo ilalagay yung I am GUI pagka nagano nyo, no? Doon sa taas. O, diba? Meron na siyang practice. Nilagay niya yung windows.h. Ayan. Okay. Dahil dyan, meron kang experimentation na ginawa. Meron kang plus 5. May additional na plus 5. So, hindi lang 5 yung nakuha mo. 10 points. Naka 10 points si Juan Miguel. Alright. Thank you. Ayan yung gano'n, no? Ibig sabihin, pinag-iisipan niyo yung ginagawa natin, no? Kahit minor, no? Alright, next. Giancarlo Reyes. Urong mo ng konti. Yan. Get. 84. Ano yung color 84 na yan? Kulay blue. Nagawa mo na yan dati. Sayang eh, no? Okay, yung next. Nagawa mo na dati yan eh, kaya right, 7. That's less. Okay, next. And yung equal. Ayan. Okay. Alright. Thank you. Sayang, no? Nagawa niya na dati. Alright, next. Jessica B. Berdida. Jessica. Yes. Sige. napapansin nyo, dun sa mga naglalagay ng mga bagong items, no? Medyo kumakain siya ng ano, no, ng ng load ng ano, ng pagiging mabilis. Katulad nito, no, nilagay niya ng ano pa lang no, nag-ano lang siya ng capitalize, tumataas na agad yung ano, 4 seconds. Na umani yung bilis ng ano niya, no, ng output niya. Tapos ayan, nag-iintay siya para lang yung gray, nag-gray out siya. Yung response time niya, tumatagal. Yan. Okay. So, ang ma-appreciate nyo lang dyan, class, no, every time meron tayong dinadagdag na bago, no, meron siyang effect dun sa response time. Lalo, halimbawa, maglalagay tayo ng ano, yung, halimbawa, kung balak nyo gamitin yung I am GUI, syempre, yun na nga, kung narinig nyo ng buo yung sinabi ni Kuya, medyo may response time, kasi GUI, rendering yon, ano. So, ito, nag-ano ka lang, nag-capital ka lang dyan, meron na siya agad response time na medyo bagal ng konti. No? Imagine kung yan ay picture. Okay, salamat, Jessica. Right. Next, si Joanna Mika Villegas. Okay, nag-color din siya. Pero nakita na natin yung color na yan eh. Okay. Less than. Okay, bilis. 1 second lang. And 12. Okay. Alright. Thank you. Benji. Benji next. Tapos susundan siya ni Jerome. Okay, may ginawang bago si Benji. Tingnan nga natin kung anong mangyayari dito, no? So, okay, binago mo yung color. Tapos, para saan yung line na yon, Benj? Para saan yung line? Teka muna, sagutin mo muna ako. Sige, maglagay ka ng ano.
Ma'am, ano pong line?
Sige, lagay mo. Maglagay ka ng item. Ayun na yung line na nakikita mo. Yung line...
Ay, ma'am, ganyan na po talaga yun, ma'am, pag i-launch po yung application.
Okay. So, sige, iurong mo yan. Urong mo. Urong mo dun sa kabila, dito, yan. Okay, so, saan yan in reference dito sa ginawa mo?
Anong part po, ma'am?
Sorry, anong bago dyan sa ginawa mo na hindi nag-exist dun sa pinapagawa ko?
Actually, wala mang bago dyan, ma'am. Dinagyan ko lang ng kulay. Tsaka yung system CLS after mag-execute ng mga conditionals.
Pero yung system na color. System na color, tama ba?
Apo.
Hindi. Yung CLS, alam ko sa ano yan eh. Sa system CLS sa code block. So, pwede rin palang gamitin yan sa sa DevC.
Pwede po sa DevC, no?
Pwede rin sa DevC. So, anong purpose ng CLS?
Parang i-clear screen niya po yung main function, ma'am, or yung starting point ng execution. Tapos ipapalitan ng mga conditionals.
Papalitan. So, parang lang siya, tagalinis lang siya, ganon.
Opo.
Bakit kailangan mo ng tagalinis?
Para lang po, para maiba.
Okay. Alright. So, since sinabi mo wala ka namang ginawang bago, di sana bibigyan sana kita ng 5 points. Okay. So, wala kang nilagay na bago? Talaga? Okay. Walang reklamo? Bench?
Wala po, ma'am. Wala po.
Walang reklamo. Okay. So, wala siyang ginawang bago, sabi niya. Okay. Alright. Thank you, Bench. Alright, next. Si Jerome. Obo. Okay. Pag nag-code, abo! O, bago yan, bago yan. Bago yan, ha. Hindi ko pa nakita yan, ha. O, sige, yung equal. Ganun din mangyayari. Aba! Okay, na yung nagbabago pagka, ano, no? Pagka may output dun sa, ano. Sige nga. Sige nga, Jerome. Explain mo nga paano mo ginawa yan. O, di ba makakuha ng 5 points ngayon si, ano, dahil may bago siyang ginawa. Hindi ko pa to nakita. Sige, Jerome, explain mo nga kung paano mo ginawa yun.
Narinig po ako, ma'am?
Oo, dinig.
Bali po, nilagyan ko po ng unang system color sa start ng program. So, yun po yung naging color sa yan. And then, kapag po pinindot na po yung enter, kasi out, nagkakaroon po ng bagong system color. Dun po sa pagka lumalabas na po yung pangalawang option, ay yung pangalawang see out na po. Kaya po nag-iiba po yung kulay niya. Nadi-disregard po yung unang system color and napapalitan po nung pangalawang color.
Good job! O, yan. Gusto ko yung mga ganyang experiment. Hindi siya nakakano dun sa instruction. Alright, good job. So, ibig sabihin, Jerome, meron kang additional 5 points. Okay. Alright. So, gusto ko yung ganyan, ano? Ibig sabihin na nadadigest niyo yung ating pinag-aaralan. Tapos may naisip ko yung gustong idagdag. Ayan. Thank you, Jerome. Additional. So, naka 10 points ka. Next, si Kim. Kim Shalom. Alright. So, nilagyan niya ng pangalan niya. Okay. Alright. That's greater. That's equal. So, ano pa yung hindi mo nagawa? Yung less than ba nagawa mo na? Ayan. Less than. Alright. Okay. Nothing much, nothing new. Ilagyan niya lang ng pangalan. Nagawa niya na yan dati. Salamat, Kim. Alright. Next, si Edzon. Edzon. Edzon, anya na. Anong gagawin ko? Experimentohan ko kayo. Edzon. Okay. Right? Okay. Alright. Okay. Well, that's equal. Okay. Okay. Greater. Okay. Thank you. Nothing new. Alright. Next. Si Christine Joy. Million. Global L eh. Yan. Million. Okay. Tingnan natin kung meron siyang ginawang bago. Okay, wala. Nilagyan niya ng name. And then, alright. Okay. Boom. Gumamit din siya ng system CLS. Para lang malinis. Okay. Alright, equal. Okay. Thank you, Christine. Next, Beatrice. Lyle Oserin. Katapos ni Beatrice, si Joaquin. Si Macol. Ugasan ko to. Ano nangyari kay Beatrice? Baka meron siyang chat. Wala naman. Balik tayo dito. Ano nangyayari? Ang tagal. But, Beatrice, what's wrong? Anything wrong? May nangyayari ba sa'yo dyan?
Nagloloko daw siya. Ay, nagloloko daw yung PC niya, ma'am.
Nagloloko. Okay. So, okay, balikan ka namin, Beatrice. Joaquin. Macol. Okay, tingnan nga natin kung meron tong ano. Looks like wala namang bago. Okay. Right. And and yung equal to 12. Alright. Okay. Right. Joaquin, thank you. Next, si Casey. Beatrice, sabi mo pag okay ka na ha, para babalikan ka namin. Uy, meron siyang stars. Stars spreading the news. Okay. Okay, 13 and 11. Ano yan? Less. Ano nangyari? Hindi ko nakita yung output nun. Wait. Balik. Ayan, Casey.
Ay, sorry po.
Yung last di ko nakita.
Ay,
11 sabi mo, ano nangyari doon? 11 less than. Tapos yung equal. Sige, close mo yan. Let's do equal. Ayan, equal. Okay. So, wala namang bago. Okay. Next, sino nga yung last? Si Casey. Alexandra. Kyle, Maries. 15. Wait. Medyo nalito ako dyan. Teka lang. Nag-see out ka. Biglang tinanggal eh. Medyo naguluhan ako eh. Naglagay ng 15. Sabi ko, bakit may 15 doon? O, yan. Tapos, sige. 1. Okay, less than. Okay, 12. Right. And, okay. Sabi ko, ba't ganun? Kala ko naduduling lang ako eh. Salamat. Next, si Russell de la Vega. Ma'am, di po ako makapag-present. Naglalag po data. Hello po, ma'am. Sorry, nagkaroon po ng technical. Present na lang po ako mamaya. O, sige. Yan. Di raw pwede yung dalawa. Okay, so si Michelle, Kyla. Kyla.
Hit ka na po, ma'am.
Ayan na. Diyan ka na. Papasok ka na. Okay. Ayan. Alright, sige. I-run. 12. Equal. Okay, good. Okay, tapos that's less than. Okay. Ayan yung equal. Alright, okay. Thank you, Michelle. Next, si Jules.
Ma'am, mag-alas stress na po.
Ay, oo. Meron pa tayong konting oras. Sige. Jigs. Sorry, Jules. Thanks for reminding tayo eh. Baka pwede pa ng isa. 254. 11. Okay, sige. That's less. And then okay, greater. And then yung equal. Alright. 12. Okay. Thank you. Jigs. Pwede pa? May 5 minutes pa tayo, Jigs. Baka pwede pa tayo kay umabot kay Patricia. Okay. Ano nangyari? Sinagawa mo? Ayan. Sige, out. Run. Mukhang wala namang masyadong bago dong kay Jigs. Okay, that's less. Sige, next. Greater than. Equal. Okay. How about greater than? Alright. Okay. Thank you, Jigs. Oh, Patricia. Dali. Sayang yung oras. Ayan. Okay. Mukhang wala namang masyadong bago. Sige. Alright. Next. That's equal. Next. Okay. Yeah. Run. That's less. At yung greater than. Alright. Okay. Pwede pa. Salamat, Joanna. Next, another Joanna, si Borigas. Pwede tayong umabot kay Kent. May 3 minutes pa. Okay, dito na si Borigas. Sige, load. Mukhang wala namang bago. Sige. 11 less. Sige. Next. Okay, greater. And yung equal. 12. Alright. Okay. Sige, one more. Sulitin natin yung ating oras. Kent. Harvey. Matibag. May 3 minutes pa. Okay, nakamobile siya. Oo. Okay. 9. 59. Greater. Okay. Next. Less. So less. About equal. Okay. Alright. Thank you, Kent. Oh, pwede pang isa. Colleen. 258. One more. Colleen. 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 Colleen ang naiba. Sabihin kong Colleen ang naiba. Colleen. Tagal naman ni Colleen. 2:59 na. Ayan. Okay. Right. Tingnan natin kung may naiba. Puro mo ng konti dito. Dito. Ayan. So, that is greater than. Alright. Next. Enter. Kalin, may naiba talaga sa'yo. Ah. Okay. Sige. Kalin. Less than. Class! Ano ang naiba kay Kalin? May napapansin ba kayo? Ako napansin ko na.
Yung STD po, ma'am. Tsaka
Opa! O, diba? Tama siya. Bakit hindi mo tinanggal yung STD? Eh, naka-namespace ka. Diba? O, ba't tinanggal mo yon? Hindi yun tinatanggal. Yan. So, anong tatanggalin mo dapat dyan? Yung nasa baba. Ayan. Hindi yan. O, ba't tinanggal mo yung main? Importante yan. Balik mo. Tanggal. Huwag basta-basta magtatanggal, iho. Nako, hindi magandang ugali ng developer yan. Kung hindi, ikaw ang mamumroblema in the end. Ayan. So, anong tatanggalin mo? Okay, ito yung tatanggalin mo, ha? Base doon sa instruction natin. Kasi, hindi mo na kailangan yung STD na 2 colon doon sa tabi ni Cout, ni Sin, at saka ni ENDL. O, sige, tanggalin mo na. O, diba? Kasama yung STD doon. O, balikan mo yung unang Cout mo. Sige. Yan. Okay. O, yung isa doon sa dulo, yung ENDL. Hindi, teka, wag ko kang mag-ano. Ayan. Okay, tanggalin mo rin yan. Sige. Hanggang kay STD. Sige, balikan mo. Oh! Tinan mo, nag-error na yon. Oh, kulay itim. Yung STD, nakatabi ni ENDL, kasama yan tatanggalin. Ayan. Sige, alisin mo yan. Yan. Correct ka dyan. O, ganyan ang gawin mo para dun sa lahat. O, diba? Yan. O, di matatandaan mo na yan, no? Pagka gumamit ka ng namespace, yun ang tatanggalin mo, ha? Iho. Okay, Kalin. Naintindihan ba, Kalin? Meron ka bang microphone dyan? Kalin. Okay. O, sige. Opo. Okay po. Alright. O, sige, break na raw tayo. Sabi ni meron na tayong, nag-exceed tayo ng 1 minute. Si Tayone ay nagsabi na. O sige ha, Russell, Beatrice. Mamaya, pagbalik ha, mauna kayong dalawa. Alright, okay, break muna tayo, class. At babalik kayo. Tayone, anong oras ang balik nila?
4, ma'am, 4.
Okay, 4. O, babalik ng 4, class ha. Sige, see you in a bit. Break muna. Break muna. Okay. Ako ay mag-alagay ng music. Music. Okay. Teka, music. Alam ko na. Pwede palang i-post tong ko. Ano nga pala tong gamit ko? Pwede dito. Pwede ba? Pwede bang i-post? Ay, hindi. Ang haba na eh. I-end ko na lang tapos isang oras naman yung matatapos din agad.